happened. That sounded so weird. But here we are. It's Friday morning. It's episode 13, I think, of Start, Scale, Grow, which is a show about hiring for businesses of all stages. And I'm absolutely thrilled. It's been a little while coming. We took a little while to get here, but Cameron Nott from the Myers-Briggs company, absolute pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much. Did you want to just take a minute or so to sort of give an intro to you and what you do and what your role is?
Yeah, no, thanks, Simon, and hi, and hi to the audience out there. So for those who I haven't met, probably a number of you, I'm a consulting psychologist. I do a lot of work in helping leaders develop and grow. I do a lot of work in helping leaders and their leadership teams become high-performing. I also do some work in the area of talent selection, so working with organizations, really at that kind of professional and senior leader level to make sure they're making some quality hires, kind of adding in the psychological insight through psychometric assessments. The other hat that I wear is I am the leader of the Asia Pacific region for the Myers-Briggs company.
Perfect, thank you. It sounds like a big job. I'm sure it is. I don't think there's any hiding the fact that we've sort of entered into this new world of work post-COVID, certainly post the goings on in the tech market last year that sort of seemed to impact most people. And this is throwing out new challenges for leaders in terms of managing remote teams, managing hybrid teams, but then also in the way that leaders and TA teams are thinking about hiring and selection. I think whenever we're talking about hiring, we're trying to manage predictors of success as much as possible. Like it's kind of easy to hire someone who is kind of okay. Most businesses, in my experience, want to hire the best people they possibly can, and that generally just doesn't just happen by itself. It needs a consolidated effort from a hiring team. It needs logical thinking around the requirements of the role and insights into the people that you're meeting with, which is why I thought this conversation would be really interesting. Did you want to just take a minute or so, just give a bit of background into what the Myers-Briggs product does, like a really sort of brief sort of history timeline?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess there's at the Myers-Briggs company, I guess we have a range of solutions, but we also have some assessments as well. And probably comes as no surprise that the MBTI, which is a really popular personality assessment. So that's one of the assessments that we have, very, very popular. It's an assessment that we use in the development space. So it's really about helping self-awareness. It's help building teams, for teams to learn more about each other, for leaders to learn more about their natural leadership style. The MBTI, it's an assessment we don't use in the selection space. There are assessments we do use. I'll come to that in terms of what makes how they can differentiate. But really, what the value of the MBTI assessment and other indeed similar validated psychometric assessments that kind of can work in a similar way, where it's about it's giving people a language, it's giving people a model, a framework to start to learn more about ourselves and start to appreciate and learn more about others and appreciate some of those differences, so we can kind of navigate those differences and work more effectively together. So we kind of use the MBTI in more of the development space. In terms of the selection space, we will tend to use more trait-based assessment tools, so cognitive ability assessments, personality assessments, but that are a little more granular than Myers-Briggs, and we'll look at different kinds of characteristics and measure them in a different way. We can look at emotional intelligence as well. So there's a few different lenses there that can give us some insights into a candidate when we're looking, when we're working on that selection side.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I'll put my hand up. I'm a huge fan of personality profiles and assessments. I think the better you can understand people and use whatever tools you can to do that is only a good thing, particularly for leaders, and particularly, as I said, in this world of remote/hybrid work. I think anything that you can leverage to better understand the people that you're leading or you're in charge of, whose careers are in your hands, then that's better. I think it's probably fair to say that there's probably mixed feelings about psychometric tests or personality profiling across the board. Certainly in HR and TA world, depending on who you ask, I think some people are really pro them, others are really anti them. I get the sense that the majority of people who are anti them have either had a bad experience with them or don't fully understand them, which is probably fair to say of a lot of products in our space. But I think that there's a real opportunity again. I think in this new world of work to leverage whatever we can. And I think the other thing is, I think anything that can potentially slow a process down can be viewed as a handbrake by hiring teams who are always wanting to move quickly. That go on LinkedIn, there's always people talking about fast game is a good game, and you got to hire quickly because the market's so volatile. But I think that the best teams find this balance between moving quickly but still making the best, most validated hiring decisions they can. Does that sort of time with where your thoughts are?
Oh, look, absolutely. I guess, even as a manager, when I'm hiring people for my team here over the years, and I've been doing this here for the last 15 years, sometimes there is just that pressure to make a hire, to get someone who might be pretty close and kind of get them in that role. But I guess you have to look at the other side of it, the cost of making a bad hire. So if we do rush it, and if we're on more of that recruiting side, then yes, we might have a candidate that has said all the right things in the interview, that kind of ticks a lot of boxes in terms of their qualifications and experience. But maybe they're just someone who interviews really well, and when it comes down to them getting in the role, it hasn't worked out. They haven't been a great fit with the team, with the leader. They haven't been, really don't have that motivation, that conscientiousness. And then I guess it's like, well, we might have put someone in quite quickly. What's the reputational damage? What's the cost of putting in the wrong person and needing to kind of rehire for that role? So I guess, look, to take, and the clients that we tend to work with who are using assessments as part of selection, it's kind of, it tends to be at that final stage, and it might be with the final one or two candidates. And really what you're doing is you're just bringing in the benefit of some objective psychological insight that will give you some really granular insights in terms of the competencies the person has. Again, it could be about their cognitive ability, their cognitive agility, certain characteristics that they might have that might be important for the role. And you're going to be looking for different things for different roles, of course. And then it's not going to, it will also give the recruiter and the manager just maybe some ideas of, it's going to help confirm maybe what you already know, but also might give you some insights and some questions that you might want to use as a final check-in with that candidate, or maybe to validate against kind of referee checks or other parts of the process. So it's just another, again, if you're using the right kinds of assessments, it can just give you another objective insight that can be really helpful to make sure. So you've got the confidence that you're doing the best you can to make the right hire.
Yeah, and you touched on a point there that I was going to get to, so you beat me to it. For me as well, some of these assessments are a great way of leveling out any potential bias. So you made the point, some people can interview really, really well. The hiring team, we really like them. They're full of verve and vigor, and they speak really well, and we love the ideas that they're talking about. And we all get caught up in this. Well, we run the risk of getting caught up in this sort of this buy-in to somebody, this halo effect that some people get when they're interviewing. But this profiling, this understanding, this assessment of who they really are away from the interview room, away from their job, which in that moment is to interview really well, and really understanding who they are. I'm sure you probably experienced vast differences in who someone really is and then who they interview as.
Yeah, absolutely. That there's people who can tell you exactly what you want to hear, and be very, very charismatic and charming as part of the process. And maybe that's part of the role. Maybe they have some really great interpersonal skills. But I guess on the other, but maybe what I guess what the assessments can show you is, again, maybe they're not so conscientious, maybe they're not so motivated, maybe they're just kind of telling you what you want to hear. I guess on the flip side, there are people who maybe don't interview so well, and maybe that's because it's, the interpersonal skills aren't as important in their role. So, some people who might be, more focused on administrative tasks, or kind of, working in that IT world and kind of doing some coding, and maybe don't have the same sorts of interpersonal skills as some people who maybe are working in kind of certain leadership roles or sales roles.
Yeah.
So, again, you talked a bit about that idea of bias, and it could be that, we might be, restricting ourselves to some, really talented, and excluding some really talented people who've got the right competencies, got the right qualities to be really successful in the role.
Yeah.
But they're just not great in terms of the interview process. And so the assessments can be helpful in terms of finding that hidden gem.
Yeah, perfect. A couple of things. First one, you mentioned cognitive ability and cognitive agility. I obviously have neither, because I think I've heard of them, but I don't understand the difference. So did you want to just expand on that for us?
Yeah, sure. I guess, look, in terms of abilities, we'll tend to look at things like, skills with kind of vocabulary, numeracy, financial reasoning. So kind of very focused abilities, or very discrete abilities. The agility, versatility piece, it's kind of more about what's our ability to kind of grow and stretch, to kind of move beyond what might be our safe space, kind of doing what we know, to how much potential does this person have to grow and take on new and different responsibilities, and also, what's their ability like to sort of think on their feet. So it's kind of more about how the mind works as opposed to those more discrete abilities.
Gotcha. So is the cognitive ability like the ability to learn things? So maths, English, such, and the agility is the thinking. Maybe would that abstract thinking, abstract reasoning tie into cognitive agility? Is that
it can as well? Absolutely, that's a really good predictor.
Gotcha. Perfect. And the other thing I was going to ask you was, you mentioned that often customers use the assessments towards the end of the process. Is that the best time to do it?
Oh, look, we'd
or is there a best time?
Yeah, I think it'd be great to do it earlier in the piece. And so then you're giving yourself a wider pool of people to, and indeed there are some cases where that happens. So you've got these great insights around a wider pool, and again, it may just help you, select into the process of people who maybe you weren't necessarily considering, or give you some other insights about those candidates who you might want to then follow up in terms of next steps in the process. But I guess if it's you mentioned at the start of the episode about some people might have the concerns around time, and I guess you've got your own processes, and there's costs associated with this as well. When you've got your processes, you're moving them through the funnel, and it might be a case of, all right, we've gotten to that last point, and we just want to do that bit of a safety check, in terms of who we're looking to put forward, and just to make sure, perhaps you do save it for that short list and kind of use that as that final step.
Yeah. I think one of the other things that I've heard consistently around running these kind of assessments is interpreting the data and understanding exactly what we're looking for and how to read that at the other end. And I'm sure it's the case where, from your perspective, a new client comes on board and you've got a champion internally at a customer who really values the benefit that assessments bring and really believes in them and brings them into the business. If that person moves on but the business is still using them, how do we use them from here on in? So I guess that, the piece around the validation, the understanding what we're looking for it's just got to be so important, right?
Yeah, it is. Working, there's a couple of pieces there. So making sure the people who are using assessments, whether it's the practitioner, whether it's an internally trained practitioner or an external consultant, external provider, just to make sure that you're qualified about to use the tool. You understand the client, you understand that the key competencies required for success, and that we're all on the same page. I think that's certainly critical.
And I'm guessing with the investment that people making in assessments, having someone who's accredited or something internally is a logical way to go. What's that process like to become accredited?
Again, so we will. So for the different assessments we have, it's typically a process where you will attend either a 2-day or a 4-day training program, and that will then qualify you to use the tool. It's very, very hands-on. People tend to take the assessments themselves, learn more about themselves, learn more about the process, get experience in terms of interpreting them, providing feedback, and then receive ongoing support. In terms of our model, there's always the ongoing support there as well. So that's if you wanted to bring that capability in-house to get qualified to use these tools. I guess on the other hand, then you can use one of our trained practitioners to help you as well. Yeah.
Are there any roles that you think these assessments are more suited to over others?
Look, to be fair, I think it's great to use with every role. It's just another kind of step in the process. It's going to give you that objective psychological insight. If I think about some of the clients that we're working with, I can just during this week have provided some feedback about whether it's recruiting an executive assistant. There's a salesperson, people involved in kind of business development, through to some strategic leaders. So we are using it sort of, across the board to provide that, again, that kind of safety check, that additional psychological insight to help the client kind of make the best decision they can.
Yeah. Okay. So it can be used for any role, and I'm guessing there are different assessment banks that complement different roles.
It's a good point. Look, I think for most roles we'll tend to use cognitive abilities and personality assessment. When we start to move into senior leadership roles, then we'll tend to wind in like emotional intelligence as well, because it's certainly a key, important at all levels, but certainly you want to have emotionally intelligent leaders.
Yeah, and from a timing perspective, what's the sort of the length of completion to do an assessment at the candidate end generally?
Yeah, look, each assessment varies. Look, if but on average, say 20 to 30 minutes per assessment.
Right.
There's the getting people set up, and then there's sort of the feedback component as well. But from the candidate experience, it's probably around about 20 to 30 minutes per assessment.
Yeah. And I think with just thinking back to some clients who I've worked with recently who use assessments of various kinds, I've not had any. I was having this conversation with them last week. I've not had one candidate refuse to do it or want to withdraw from the process because of these things. So I think the way that you sell the assessments to candidates, and like why we're doing it, what it'll uncover, how it helps, but more importantly, how it helps them, is just so important. So I think using the right language and the right terminology around them at the beginning is important. I do think a lot of the resistance comes from inside hiring teams, not from the candidate side. Again, I've not had one candidate in over a year that I've been working with a specific client who run tests for every hire. I've not ever had one candidate say, "No, I'm not doing it. It's too big of an impact on the time."
Yeah.
So I think that you mentioned candidate experience. I think if you're thinking holistically about what you're trying to deliver, and it's trying to get that blend of what's good for us from a hiring decision perspective, but then also what's going to work well and deliver a good candidate experience at the other end. So
yeah, definitely. And just again on that resistance, look, I think a point that we made earlier, it's the resistance, I guess, can come from the recruiter has put a lot of work into kind of getting, trying to find the one or two, really great candidates. It's not easy to do. And you don't really want anything that would rule that person out. And I guess it's a case of, taking that next step to say, what happens if that candidate doesn't work out? What's the reputational damage for you? What's the rehiring kind of cost and process? And if you can be sure just to have that one more sort of safety check, get that objective insight, that objective psychological insight to the candidate, give you just a few more questions just to kind of follow up with the candidate, follow up with the referees, just so you've got even more confidence that in making that decision or making that recommendation.
Yeah. Has the nature of the assessments, and I guess what I'm getting at is like the questions or the things that you're trying to uncover in the assessments, has that changed at all post-COVID with the advent of remote working? Have you had like requests from customers wanting to better understand certain things?
Yeah, look, this is a really interesting question. So in terms of the changes, I think when we look at the assessments themselves haven't really changed. These are kind of long-standing, well-validated, very reputable assessments that we know work. It's kind of more of a case of, what are we recruiting for? So what are the competencies? And I guess there's, on the one hand, there's the competencies required to be successful in the job. So what you're looking for a salesperson is going to be a little bit different to what you're looking for your accountant, perhaps.
Yeah.
There are different qualities required to be successful in those roles. So there are the competencies required for success in the role, but then there's also the case of, the competencies required for working in a fully remote or hybrid environment. So it's kind of more about the nature of the working arrangement, the nature of the role, and what you might be looking for there. So I guess as an example, if we are looking at people who are working fairly remotely, we need to have people who are have a good work ethic, who are conscientious, who are motivated. That's so that we can have that trust that they're going to be quite autonomous and in terms of how they go about their work, that they're going to be very reliable in that respect. But also, you might also be looking for people who aren't as high on some of the interpersonal scales. So we've got scales that look at things like, sociability and social presence. And so as an individual, how much social interaction do I need? And if the reality is that this role is going to be a pretty solitary role, working remotely, there's not a lot of interaction, not much in-person interaction, then you're not going to want to have someone who's got off the charts kind of social needs, because those needs aren't going to be fit, or met, I should say, within that role. So you probably, it would be, if that was coming through as part of the assessment process, then it's something you'd really want to think about, chat to the candidate about. But look, it doesn't necessarily rule someone out. Maybe the candidate they get their social needs met elsewhere, or maybe it's within the role working with customers and clients, and maybe they've demonstrated this by working, that they've worked remotely in other roles and have done so successfully. But it does give you that insight, and certainly things that you want to consider for what's going to be successful, like within the nature of the role.
Yeah, and I guess the follow on from that as well is there's in the remote world, if people are working predominantly remotely, there's a difference in the way that work happens, not necessarily what the work is, but the way it happens. So particularly in the tech space where I operate, for remote companies, a lot more documentation. So written skills, so written communication has to be really good quality. Yeah, our first protocol of understanding that is the written word on a resume. Basic grammar and spelling. I've lost count of the amount of times I've seen the word detail spelt wrongly when someone says they've got good attention to detail, good attention to detail. Like, you literally can't make it up. But jokes aside, I guess there's ways to maybe think about what you're assessing for slightly differently from a cognitive ability perspective as much as anything else.
Yeah. Look, the assessments can give some insights there, but also look, we'll sometimes throw in things like we'll encourage a client to do some kind of work samples. So if they need to know how to write an email. Let's set them up on the computer for half an hour to write a typical email. So you got to get a sense of their actual abilities, very very specific abilities that might be required for the role that maybe you can't necessarily fully assess through an assessment.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I'm thinking as well that onboarding can always have a different flavor as well. If a diagnosis, I don't know if that's the right phrase, but visiting the results of someone's assessment and giving them that insight, and this is what we've learned, and this is what someone can learn about themselves. We always talk about good quality onboarding can impact tenure of employment and quality of employment. Providing that kind of insight as part of onboarding could, I'm guessing, be pretty powerful.
Oh, look, of course. So giving the candidate a chance to receive feedback about their assessments and where their strengths are and where potential development areas lie, that's going to be really helpful. Also, just in terms of building trust with that candidate too as they're on board. But what I would then, in terms of onboarding, once we have that candidate placed, then there's, I guess, other things we can do to really look to fast track not only that individual's performance within the team, but the team, because someone new's coming to the team. It's now a new team. It's a new look team, and with very different dynamics. So that's where we'll start to look at various kind of team building exercises to really help people to learn more about each other, their work styles, their strengths, their blind spots, to do it in a way which is going to encourage the fast tracking of psychological safety and trust within the team, because it's those things that are very foundational in terms of building high-performing teams. So that the sooner that we can kind of establish that safety, that trust within the team, it's going to be, again, it's going to fast-track that path towards become high-performing.
Yeah. Is that something that comes up often in conversations, this need for psychological safety in teams? Is that something that's a recurring theme? And has that grown more over the last few years?
Oh, look, it's become, I think, just given the nature of work, we've talked a lot about kind of working in the remote environment. I think remote working, hybrid working is one of the biggest challenges that workplaces globally have experienced in decades. And there are certainly advantages of this remote working in terms of advantages in terms of work-life balance. It's a great way. There's an expectation for a lot of candidates to have that flexibility. So it is a talent kind of attraction tool. It's a talent retention tool. Benefits in terms of reduced office costs. On the other side, there are definitely some real challenges with remote working. There's challenges in terms of just the lack of reduced levels of collaboration, different kinds of collaboration. There can be a sense of disconnection with the employee with their colleagues, with their manager, with the organization. And in a sense, there can be this loss of heart to a degree. So look, and all of that is going to get in the way of the ability to build kind of that sense of safety and trust within a team, because what you're losing in this remote environment, a lot of the meetings are going to be like we're having right now. So it's a virtual meeting, and they tend to be quite task focused. It's people come together for an hour, very much focused on a particular aspect of work. And what you lose there is you lose some of those incidental social kind of interactions. The ability to read body language, to understand certain social cues. You've lost the opportunity to walk into a meeting and have a little conversation together, have a little joke on the way out of a meeting. And these are all things that build that safety and trust. So so it's a long way of getting to the point of it's because we've lost a lot of that incidental social connection and those social interactions, that we need to be much more focused on how do we build psychological safety and trust within a remote team, because we're kind of we're on the back foot a bit because there's just not as many natural opportunities for that to occur.
Yeah, yeah. In a previous episode with Andrew Murphy, he coaches leaders of remote engineering teams, and he talks about this transactional dialogue. And I think that's probably what you're alluding to. When you're working remotely, every conversation you have is just always it's transactional. When's this due? Update me on this. What's happening with that? Talk me through X, Y, Z. Give me a status report on this thing, and that can become draining. I mean, just this morning, believe it or not, this is my seventh call this morning, and they've all been like pretty much from 8 o'clock, just go, 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 and it's tiring. It's hard work doing them. Like you feel like you just don't get any space. So I absolutely agree, and I think that to me it highlights how important, particularly with remote or hybrid teams, of making the best hiring decisions you can with as much data and as much input as possible, and being as objective as possible, and using some real world tools and assessments, like the ones that you provide, is so important. So I'm absolutely on board. I think there's too much reliance at times on subjective decision making, which is where my comment around bias comes in. We really liked insert candidate name. They were really outgoing. They were really confident. Like we look at these very subjective things, and I think we rely on those too much. So I'm kind of fanboying on you then. Didn't mean to, but I think you know what I'm getting at. What's next for assessments? Do you think what's as the world of recruit HR tech grows and changes, and we're seeing lots of integrations between systems and single points of truth and that sort of thing? Do your products, are you thinking about integration? Are you already doing it? Or what's next for you from a product perspective?
Yeah, look, it's what to say. I mean, there are developments all the time. On the one hand, though, there are the kind of the tried and true assessments that are very tested. We know that they're measuring what they're meant to measure. I think with new developments, it's kind of a case of, again, just making sure that we're measuring the right things in the right way. And while automation is helpful, I think that having people in, we're working with people. We're in the people business. So I think making sure there's an opportunity to connect with people throughout the process, have those interviews, read the body language, understand them, and having that information to kind of feed into the process is always going to be key.
I can agree more. And the convenience culture that we all seem to be living in and almost slaves to at the moment, I think sometimes it makes it easy to forget, as you said, we're hiring, and business is a people game. It's a people business. So if you truly value, and I think this is where I sometimes struggle with some of the high level language I see from a lot of companies, where they talk about, we're a family, we're all about our people, but the way they go about hiring would suggest any that they think in reality anything but. There's often a big difference between what we say and what we do, right? So interesting. Anything else that you think we need to be aware of? Anything else you particularly wanted to touch on?
Look, again, I just think that when there's the hiring aspect, the selection aspect, and then we talked a bit about the onboarding process, and I just think there's probably more that leaders can be doing to make, because I mean it's ultimately about trying to create a high performing team. We've got there's a lot of challenging kind of work that we need to do out there. We need to make sure we're appointing the right people, but also that those people are working well together. So I guess I just ask leaders to start to think more about what are the sorts of things that they can be doing, especially in this more remote environment. What can they be doing to build more psychological safety and trust within their teams? Not just to have the transactional kind of online meetings, but spend some time for the team to connect a little more socially. Maybe it needs to be remote. Have the Monday morning check-in. Talk about what happened on the weekend.
Yeah,
I know that for my team here, when we're all locked down, we'll we were sharing recipes, we were sharing, shows that we're watching, exercise challenges. So, a little bit of that social connection is helpful. Make sure I'm scheduling more one-on-ones with those people who are working in a more remote environment. And again, not just to have that kind of transactional work conversation, but just, hey, how are you feeling? How's your weekend? Just understand the person. And these sorts of things. And I would also, I guess the last thing perhaps is, look, for if we are working in more remote environments, there are some cost savings. Hello.
More animals as well. I think more animals on podcasts is definitely needed.
That's a great way to build that sense of safety and trust. And look, but bringing people together. Look, take that investment, bring people together, build those social connections as part of a team build. A lot of the work that we're doing today it used to be a lot about connection, kind of just in COVID or in the pandemic and coming out of it. It's much more now about kind of building that sense of team purpose and helping individuals understand their own purpose within the team. And, that's really important in terms of that retention piece and ultimately trying to create high performance within the team that you're working in.
Agreed. And it's interesting you mentioned that, because there was something else that I meant to mention earlier as well. There's endless surveys on what things are important to employees. They've been getting done for ages. Money is rarely the top thing, but sense of purpose and learning, the ability to grow and learn and develop, those two things are generally always sort of top 3 or 4. And we've touched on both of those. So self-purpose, I think, is a great way of looking at that as well. But where the learning opportunities can be for people as well, where they're strong now that they perhaps might not have realised, and where they've got opportunities to grow as well. So a great way to segue into those things and again use it as a talent attraction piece. This has been brilliant. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to talk. For those who are watching on YouTube, Cameron's details will be underneath in the comments, and on Spotify. There should be some comments there as well, but if not, then jump over to the YouTube version, grab them there, or hit me up and we'll provide Cameron's details. And if you want to talk to him in more depth about assessments, about the work they're doing and how they can help your business, I'm sure he'd be more than happy to talk to you. Cameron, thank you again. I really, really appreciate your time. It's been great having you.
Great. Thanks, Simon. I've enjoyed the chat. Have a great day.